Wait, are you ready for this? Because the faces you grew up watching, the voices that defined your first crush, your first heartbreak, your entire playlist in the 90s and 2000s look completely different today. Some transformed, some reinvented themselves, and some, you won't believe it's even the same person. From legendary divas to neo-soul icons, we're counting down 20 R&B stars who will make you gasp when you see them today. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be staring at your screen in shock. So don't blink. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive in. Jill Scott, the woman who refused to shrink. Before the spotlight ever found her, Jill Scott was just a Philly poet with a voice too big for small rooms. She didn't arrive in R&B chasing trends. She arrived like a storm wrapped in silk. When Who Is Jill Scott dropped in 2000, it didn't just introduce an artist. It introduced a presence. Her voice, warm, soaring, unapologetically full, carried stories of love, longing, self-worth. A Long Walk felt like summer in the city. He Loves Me felt like church and candlelight at the same time. And suddenly, neo-soul had a queen who looked and sounded like real life. But Jill's journey was never about fitting the industry's mold. While others chased image, she leaned into authenticity. Album after album, she gave us grown woman truths, messy love, healing, self-discovery. Golden wasn't just a song, it was a declaration. She wasn't asking for validation. She was claiming her light. And then life happened. Changes in her body, her style, her visibility. The internet had opinions. They always do. But here's where the story turns. Jill didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She evolved. At 52, she stands not as the ingenue of neo-soul, but as a mentor, a poet, an actress, a woman deeply rooted in who she is. Her transformation isn't shocking because she changed. It's powerful because she didn't lose herself. The Gasp isn't about appearance. It's about endurance. In an industry that often discards women once you fades, Jill Scott became louder, wiser, freer. Her voice still rises. Her presence still commands. And her story whispers something deeper. A real icon doesn't chase relevance. She grows into legacy. Babyface, the quiet architect of our heartbreaks. Before his face was famous, his melodies already were. In dimly lit studios through the late 80s and 90s, Kenneth Babyface Edmonds was quietly building the emotional soundtrack of a generation. While the spotlight chased flashy performers, Babyface sat behind the glass, crafting the kind of love songs that made you call your ex at 2 a.m. Whitney. Tony, Boys to Men, TLC. His fingerprints were everywhere. Soft piano chords, aching lyrics, hooks that felt like confessionals. Then in 1989, he stepped out from the shadows. It's No Crime wasn't just a hit, it was a revelation. The mastermind had a voice. Smooth, tender, unhurried. Songs like Whip Appeal and When Can I See You didn't scream for attention. They leaned in close. Babyface didn't seduce with volume. He seduced with vulnerability. At his peak, he wasn't just charting hits. He was defining what modern R&B romance sounded like. The Quiet Storm era, he helped architect it. The heartbreak ballad formula, he perfected it. But time moves, trends shift. The industry gets louder, faster, younger. And yet, Babyface never disappeared. Instead of fighting for relevance, he evolved with grace, collaborating with new artists, reuniting with Toni Braxton for Love, Marriage and Divorce, a grown, bruised, beautifully honest exploration of love after fantasy fades. It won Grammys, yes, but more importantly, it proved something. He wasn't nostalgia. He was timeless. Today, when you see him, you might gasp, not because he changed dramatically, but because he looks almost untouched by time. Calm, polished, composed. But the real shock? After 3 decades, he's still shaping the sound of love, still writing the songs couples slow dance to, still proving that sometimes the most powerful force in music isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that knows exactly how your heart breaks. Janet Jackson, the comeback that redefined power. For a while, the world went quiet around Janet Jackson. After decades of domination, the choreography, the whispers, the cultural earthquakes. She stepped away. 7 years. No albums. No tours. Just the silence. And in an industry that moves at lightning speed, silence can feel like disappearance. But Janet Jackson was never built to fade. When Unbreakable arrived in 2015, it didn't knock politely. It debuted at #1, again, making her one of the only artists in history to score chart-topping albums across 4 consecutive decades. That wasn't luck. That was legacy. But to understand the gasp when you see Janet today, you have to rewind. Back to 1986. Control. A young woman stepping out of her family's shadow, claiming autonomy in a male-dominated industry. What Have You Done For Me Lately wasn't just a hit, it was a warning shot. She wasn't the baby sister anymore. She was precision, discipline, fire wrapped in silk. Through the years, she pushed boundaries others were too afraid to touch. Sexual empowerment, social justice, vulnerability. She didn't just dance, she commanded. Her choreography became blueprint. Her whispers became weapons. Artists like Beyoncé and Jennifer Lopez didn't just admire her, they studied her. And then the setbacks came. Controversy, scrutiny, public judgment, the kind that would end careers. But here's the thing about Janet. She bends, she doesn't break. Seeing her now, older, softer around the edges, yet still commanding, is its own kind of shock. Not because she looks different, but because she endured, because she came back on her own terms, because she proved longevity isn't about staying frozen in time. It's about evolving without surrendering your power. Janet Jackson didn't just survive pop culture, she mastered it. Diana Ross, the blueprint of stardom. Before the word diva meant spectacle, it meant Diana. In the 1960s, when America was changing and Motown was rewriting the rules of pop, a young woman with luminous eyes and impossible poise stepped to the front of a group called the Supremes. And just like that, everything shifted. Where did our love go? Stop. In the name of love. Hit after hit, Diana Ross wasn't just singing. She was redefining what a black woman could look like at the center of global fame. But groups have limits. Legends don't. In 1970, she stepped away from the Supremes and into something far more dangerous, a solo career. One wrong move, and she could have been remembered as just another former lead singer. Instead, Ain't No Mountain High Enough exploded, and Diana didn't just cross over. She transcended. Soul, pop, disco, film, fashion. She wasn't following trends. She was setting them. Then came Love Hangover, Upside Down, I'm Coming Out. Songs that weren't just hits. They were statements. Celebration, liberation, identity. She moved like royalty, dressed like fantasy, and carried herself like the future had already cleared a path for her. And when she stepped into acting, Lady Sings the Blues, she proved she wasn't just a voice. She was cinema. Seeing Diana Ross today can feel surreal. The hair still legendary. The presence still luminous, but softer now. Human. Time has touched her gently, and yet the aura remains untouchable. Because here's the truth. Every pop superstar who came after her, from Beyoncé to countless others, walked through a door Diana Ross built. The gasp isn't about how she looks now. It's about realizing she was the blueprint all along. Beyoncé, the evolution of a living icon. Some artists chase greatness. Beyoncé was born inside it. Before she ever stood alone, she stood at the center of Destiny's Child. Poised, precise, already carrying the weight of something larger than the group itself. But when Dangerously in Love dropped in 2003, it was clear. This wasn't just a solo project. It was a coronation. Crazy in Love wasn't subtle. It was explosive, confident, a declaration that the student of legends had become one herself. And from that moment forward, Beyoncé didn't just release albums. She built eras. Each chapter felt intentional, calculated, yet deeply personal. Her voice, elastic, controlled, powerful, could whisper vulnerability or roar defiance. She sang about love, betrayal, womanhood, black identity, generational pain. And she did it without ever losing commercial dominance. Then came the risks. A surprise self-titled album that changed how music was released. Lemonade, Not just an album, but a visual reckoning. Infidelity, forgiveness, rage, ancestry. It was art and autobiography fused together. And instead of shrinking under scrutiny, she expanded. Renaissance proved something else. She could still move culture. Not follow it, move it. Seeing Beyoncé today isn't shocking because she looks different. It's shocking because she somehow looks even more powerful, more deliberate, more untouchable. Motherhood softened her edges but sharpened her purpose. She isn't chasing Diana Ross's blueprint. She's extending it. The gasp comes from realizing we're watching history in real time. Not a comeback, not a reinvention. A living, breathing evolution of what it means to be a global superstar, controlled, calculated, and completely in command. Mary J. Blige, the queen who turned pain into power. Before the crowns, before the red carpets, before the awards, there was pain. In 1992, a young woman from Yonkers stepped into the spotlight with What's the 411? And everything about her felt different. Mary J. Blige didn't sing like she was untouchable. She sang like she was surviving. Her voice was raw, not polished perfection, but cracked in all the right places. When she sang You Remind Me or Real Love, it didn't feel like performance. It felt like confession. She wasn't just R&B. She was hip-hop and soul colliding. Timberland boots with heartbreak ballads. Street edge with gospel roots. The industry didn't know what to call it. So they called her the queen of hip-hop soul. But behind the hits was a woman fighting battles the public couldn't see. Addiction, toxic relationships, self-doubt. And instead of hiding it, she poured it into albums like My Life. That record wasn't just music. It was therapy pressed onto vinyl. When she sang I'm Going Down or Not Gonna Cry, women everywhere felt seen. And then something shifted. Mary stopped just surviving. She started healing. Be Without You wasn't desperation. It was strength. Her voice matured. Fuller. Steadier. The pain was still there, but now it had purpose. She became proof that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's transformation. Seeing Mary J. Blige today is powerful. The posture straighter. The confidence undeniable. Fashion forward. Award-winning actress. Businesswoman. Survivor. The gasp isn't about how she looks now. It's about how far she's come. Because Mary didn't just give us songs. She gave us permission to hurt and then rise anyway. Alicia Keys, the girl at the piano who refused to dim her light. Before the awards, before the stadiums, there was just a girl and a piano. In 2001, Alicia Keys walked into the industry differently. No overproduction, no gimmicks, just braids, raw talent, and classical training wrapped in modern soul. When Fallon hit the airwaves, it felt timeless, like it had always existed. And suddenly, R&B had a new voice. Not flashy, not forced, just honest. Her debut album, Songs in a Minor, wasn't just a success. It was a statement. She wasn't trying to compete with the loudest in the room. She let the music breathe, let the piano speak, let her voice crack when it needed to. A woman's worth felt like wisdom beyond her years. As her career grew, so did her reach. If I Ain't Got You, You Don't Know My Name. And then No One, an anthem that refused to age. She could write a love song that felt intimate and still fill arenas with it. But Alicia's evolution wasn't just musical. She began stripping away the industry's expectations, literally. Appearing makeup-free, speaking openly about self-acceptance, choosing authenticity over perfection. In a culture obsessed with image, she chose substance. And then came Empire State of Mind, a city anthem, a global moment. Her voice soaring over New York like it belonged to the skyline itself. Seeing Alicia Keys today feels grounding. She doesn't chase trends. She cultivates peace. The glamour is still there, but it's softer, intentional, rooted. The gasp isn't about drastic change. It's about quiet power. Because while the industry reinvents itself every season, Alicia Keys stayed anchored to who she was from the beginning, a woman at a piano, telling the truth. And somehow, that truth still echoes just as loud. Anita Baker, the voice that wrapped the 80s in velvet, before the flash of MTV excess, before R&B leaned into spectacle, there was Anita Baker, and her voice felt like candlelight. In the mid-1980s, when music was loud and layered, Anita chose restraint. She didn't need acrobatics. She didn't need drama. She had that contralto, rich, smoky, and possibly smooth. When Rapture arrived in 1986, it didn't just sell millions. It slowed the room down. Sweet Love, Caught Up in the Rapture, songs that felt like slow dances in dim living rooms. Her voice didn't rush. It lingered. It made you feel seen in your quietest moments. She wasn't chasing youth culture. She was speaking to grown love, mature longing, vulnerable devotion. But her story didn't begin at superstardom. Before the Grammys and platinum plaques, Anita sang with Chapter 8, talented, overlooked, fighting for recognition. The industry didn't immediately open its arms. She had to outlast rejection, outlast out. And when she finally stepped fully into her own lane, she defined it. Through the late 80s and early 90s, her sound became synonymous with sophistication. Jazz-infused R&B, emotional precision, albums that stayed on charts for years because they weren't trendy. They were timeless. Then, like many artists of her era, she stepped back. Legal battles, industry fatigue, time passed. Seeing Anita Baker today feels like rediscovering a classic vinyl record, softer around the edges, slower in movement, but the voice, still velvet, still powerful, still unmistakable. The Gasp isn't about dramatic reinvention. It's about endurance. In a world that often discards mature artists, Anita Baker stands as proof that elegance never expires. Some voices don't age. They deepen. Patti LaBelle, the fire that never burned out. Before powerhouse vocals became a competition, Patti LaBelle was already setting the bar and then raising it. In the 1960s, she wasn't just another girl group singer. With the Bluebells and later LaBelle, Patti's voice didn't blend quietly into harmony. It soared above it. And when Lady Marmalade exploded onto the charts, bold and unapologetic, it wasn't just a hit. It was attitude. It was liberation. It was Patti stepping into her power. But groups dissolve. Icons don't. When LaBelle disbanded, many wondered if her moment had passed. Instead, Patti launched into a solo career that felt even bigger. If Only You Knew, You Were My Friend. Ballads that weren't just sung, they were testified. She didn't perform. She preached emotion. Then came the 80s reinvention. New attitude. Bright, electric, cinematic. Patti proved she could evolve without losing the fire that made her unmistakable. And when she sang On My Own with Michael McDonald, it became an anthem of heartbreak wrapped in elegance. But Patti's true power has always been live performance. No studio trickery. No backing track safety nets. Just a 3-octave range that could shake a theater. Her rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow wasn't just a cover. It was a spiritual event. High notes that felt like they broke the ceiling. Runs that felt like freedom itself. Time has touched Patti. Yes, the movements are slower. The stage steps more deliberate. But the fire? Still there. Seeing her now doesn't make you gasp because she changed. It makes you gasp because she never dimmed. Decades in, Patti LaBelle doesn't perform like someone protecting a legacy. She performs like someone still building one. Lionel Richie, the romantic who soundtracked a generation. Before streaming numbers, before viral moments, there were slow dances in living rooms, and Lionel Richie was playing the background. He first stepped into the spotlight as the smooth voice behind the Commodores. In the 1970s, their blend of soul and funk felt effortless, easy. 3 Times a Lady. Songs that didn't shout, they reassured. Lionel's voice wasn't flashy. It was comforting, warm, the kind that made heartbreak feel survivable. But the real shift came in the early 80s. Going solo was a gamble. Leaving the safety of a band to stand alone can end careers. Instead, it launched his legend. Truly. Hello. Say You, Say Me. Ballads, so tender they felt handwritten. Lionel didn't just sing about love. He lingered in it. He made vulnerability masculine at a time when few dared. And then, just when you thought you understood him, he flipped the energy all night long, dancing on the ceiling. Suddenly, the quiet romantic was throwing the party. Bright colors, big choruses, global rhythms. He proved he wasn't confined to slow jams. He could move the world. For years, his music crossed borders effortlessly. Soul met pop, romance met celebration, and his piano remained the anchor, steady, intimate. Time, of course, shifts every star's orbit. Trends change. The industry races forward. Yet Lionel Richie didn't disappear into nostalgia. Seeing him today feels like watching someone who understands exactly who he is. The smile familiar, the voice seasoned but recognizable, soft around the edges, but still magnetic. The Gasp isn't about dramatic transformation. It's about longevity. Because decades later, when Hello plays, the room still pauses. And that's the kind of legacy you can't manufacture. You can only earn. Erykah Badu, the high priestess who rewrote the rules. When Erykah Badu arrived in 1997, she didn't enter the industry. She disrupted it. With head wraps stacked like crowns and a stare that felt ancient, she stepped onto the scene with Baduism and shifted the entire frequency of R&B. On wasn't just a song, it was a meditation. Jazz, hip-hop, soul, braided together with lyrics that felt cosmic, intimate, and unapologetically black. She wasn't chasing pop radio. She was building a movement. Neo-soul suddenly had a face, and it was fearless. Next lifetime. Tyrone. That live performance of Tyrone felt unscripted, raw, almost rebellious. She didn't sing for approval. She sang like she already knew her worth. But Badu's evolution has never been predictable. She moved like an artist unconcerned with mainstream comfort. Bag Lady felt like therapy wrapped in melody. Window Seat was bold, controversial, vulnerable, stripping down metaphorically and literally to challenge society's gaze. She blurred lines constantly, collaborating with Common, remixing Drake, bridging generations without losing her mystique. While others polished their image, Badu leaned deeper into individuality. The hats got taller, the energy more spiritual, the boundaries more fluid. And then time passed, but Erykah didn't conform. Seeing her today feels like encountering a living art installation. The style still daring, the presence still magnetic. She's less industry product, more cultural force. The Gasp isn't about aging. It's about how untouched she feels by the machinery of fame. In a world obsessed with fitting in, Erykah Badu built a lane, so unique no one else could occupy it. She didn't evolve to survive the industry. She evolved to outgrow it. Maxwell, the silence that made the comeback louder. In the mid-90s, when R&B was leaning harder into gloss and bravado, Maxwell arrived like a whisper that somehow commanded the entire room. Maxwell's urban hang suite didn't scream for attention, it seduced it. Ascension. Whenever, wherever, whatever. His voice was smooth but never lazy, sensual without being forced. He carried himself like mystery wrapped in silk. Neo-soul suddenly had a leading man who didn't need theatrics to feel magnetic. Then came the cover that changed everything. This woman's work. Fragile, vulnerable, almost trembling. Maxwell didn't just sing it. He exposed something, and listeners leaned in closer. By the early 2000s, he had solidified his place. Albums praised, tours sold out, a reputation built on intimacy. And then he disappeared. 8 years. No albums. No constant headlines. In an industry that punishes absence, silence can be fatal. People whispered that maybe the moment had passed. But in 2009, Black Summer's Night arrived, and it wasn't nostalgia. It was refinement. Pretty Wings floated like heartbreak in slow motion. Bad Habits burned low and steady. His voice deeper, more controlled, the mystique intact. The hiatus didn't erase him. It sharpened him. Seeing Maxwell today feels like watching someone who understands restraint. The curls more subtle, the presence calmer, the energy less urgency, more intention. The Gasp isn't about dramatic reinvention. It's about how little he compromised. While others chased trends, Maxwell waited, perfected, returned when he had something meaningful to say. And that's the quiet power of his legacy. Sometimes the loudest statement an artist can make is knowing when to disappear and exactly when to come back. D'Angelo, the genius who vanished and returned changed. In 1995, when Brown Sugar hit the airwaves, it didn't feel like a debut. It felt like a revival. D'Angelo wasn't just making R&B. He was resurrecting something spiritual inside it. The groove was thick. The vocals were honeyed and raw at the same time. Lady, Cruisin', songs that felt dipped in vinyl warmth and Prince-inspired sensuality. He wasn't polished in a pop way. He was magnetic in a musician's way. A purist, a craftsman. Neo-soul suddenly had a cornerstone. Then came voodoo, and everything shifted. Untitled, How Does It Feel wasn't just a song. It became a cultural moment. The video, the vulnerability, the physical transformation. Overnight, D'Angelo became more than an artist. He became an image, a symbol of desire, and with that attention came pressure. What followed wasn't another quick album. It was silence. Years passed. Rumors swirled. Struggles surfaced. Fame can magnify brilliance, but it can also magnify weight. For D'Angelo, the spotlight became heavy. 14 years after Voodoo, he returned with Black Messiah, and it wasn't a comeback album built on nostalgia. It was urgent, political, layered, the grooves darker, the voice weathered but resolute. It felt like a man who had wrestled with himself and chosen purpose. Seeing D'Angelo today can surprise you. The body different, the mystique intact but matured. Less about sensual spectacle, more about substance. The Gasp isn't about how he looks. It's about how long he was willing to disappear to protect his artistry. In a culture obsessed with constant output, D'Angelo chose depth over speed. And when he returned, he didn't chase relevance. He reminded everyone why he mattered in the first place. Tina Turner, the phoenix who refused to stay burned. Before she was a global icon, before the stadium tours and platinum hair, Tina Turner was surviving. In the 1960s, alongside Ike Turner, she was already electric, explosive energy, legs in constant motion, a voice that didn't just hit notes. It attacked them. Proud Mary wasn't performed. It was detonated. Audiences didn't watch Tina. They braced for her. But behind the choreography and spotlight was turmoil, control, abuse, fear. And for years, the world saw the glamour but not the battle. Then came the fall, divorce, financial ruin, industry doubt. She was written off, labeled yesterday's star. In an era obsessed with youth, a woman in her 40s wasn't supposed to rise again. But Tina Turner didn't follow rules. In 1984, Private Dancer changed everything. What's Love Got to Do with It wasn't just a hit. It was defiance wrapped in melody. Her voice carried gravel now. Experience. Survival. She wasn't singing as a girl anymore. She was singing as a woman who had walked through fire, and the world listened. Stadium tours. Global dominance. Leather skirts. Towering hair. A reinvention so powerful it eclipsed her first act. She didn't just return, she ascended. Seeing Tina later in life felt almost mythic. The body softer, the movement slower, but the aura untouchable. There's something different about artists who've truly endured. Their presence doesn't beg for applause, it commands respect. The Gasp isn't about transformation, it's about resilience. Because Tina Turner didn't just reinvent her career, she rewrote her destiny. And in doing so, she became more than a star. She became proof that it's never too late to rise, louder, stronger, and entirely on your own terms. Chaka Khan, the voice that could split the sky. Before the wigs, before the solo stardom, before the iconic anthem, there was a voice that refused to be contained. In 1974, Chaka Khan burst onto the scene with Rufus and a Stevie Wonder pen groove called Tell Me Something Good. And from the first note, it was obvious this wasn't background talent. This was power. Raw, elastic, fearless. Her voice didn't sit politely in the mix. It soared above it, gritty and glorious. She didn't just sing funk. She embodied it. But Chaka wasn't meant to stay confined to a band. When she stepped into her solo era, she didn't shrink. She exploded. I'm Every Woman wasn't just a hit. It was a declaration. Strength, multiplicity, identity. Her voice wrapped around every lyric like it owned it. Then came Through the Fire, a ballad so vocally demanding it felt almost impossible. And yet she delivered it with aching control, proving she wasn't just high energy. She was technical mastery. Even Prince's I Feel For You became something entirely new in her hands. R&B fused with hip-hop ahead of its time. But like many legends, Chaka's path wasn't smooth. Industry pressures, personal struggles, public scrutiny. The highs were astronomical, the lows equally visible. And still, the voice endured. Seeing Chaka Khan today feels like witnessing living electricity. The look may have shifted. The years may show gently in her features. But when she opens her mouth, that sky-splitting power remains. The Gasp isn't about change. It's about range. Few artists can bend genres. Fewer can bend time. Chaka Khan did both. She didn't just contribute to R&B and funk. She defined what vocal freedom sounds like. Bold, unfiltered, and absolutely unforgettable. R. Kelly, the talent that collided with its own shadow. In the early 90s, R&B shifted, and Kelly was at the center of it. With Public Announcement and then on his own, he crafted a sound that felt bold, provocative, unapologetically sensual. Bump and grind. Your body's Callan. The production was slick. The hooks unforgettable. He understood rhythm in a way that felt instinctive. He didn't just ride the beat. He built it around desire. But his reach went beyond seduction. I Believe I Can Fly soared in a completely different direction. Inspirational, cinematic, almost spiritual. He wasn't boxed into one mood. Party anthems like Step in the Name of Love coexisted with sprawling narrative experiments like Trapped in the Closet, a saga that blurred R&B with soap opera drama. For a time, he was untouchable. A hit maker, a songwriter for others, a producer shaping the sound of late 90s and early 2000s R&B. His influence was everywhere, whether credited or not. But talent doesn't exist in isolation from truth. As the years passed, allegations that had long lingered grew louder. Investigations, courtrooms, testimonies. The narrative around his music shifted from celebration to reckoning. Eventually, convictions followed. Racketeering, sex trafficking, casting a permanent shadow over his legacy. Seeing R. Kelly today doesn't bring nostalgia. It brings conflict. Because the Gasp here isn't about aging. It's about collapse. It's about how towering influence can unravel. How artistry and accountability collide. How a catalog once played at weddings and parties now sits in complicated silence. His story isn't one of reinvention or resilience. It's a cautionary chapter, a reminder that impact in music can be powerful, but character defines what endures. And sometimes, the fall is louder than the rise. Al Green, the whisper that became eternal. In the 1970s, when soul music was reaching its emotional peak, Al Green didn't just sing, he ached. Partnering with producer Willie Mitchell in Memphis, he crafted a sound that felt intimate enough to be a secret. Let's stay together. Tired of being alone. Love and happiness. His falsetto didn't overpower. It hovered, light, tender, almost fragile, and yet it carried an intensity that could stop a room mid-conversation. Al Green's voice felt like confession at midnight. Gospel-rooted but sensual. Spiritual, yet deeply human. He blurred the line between sacred and romantic, making longing feel holy. But behind the velvet tone was turbulence. Fame came fast. Relationships burned bright and messy. A traumatic incident in the mid-70s forced a reckoning that would alter his path. Instead of leaning further into stardom, Al Green turned inward toward faith, toward ministry. For a time, the pulpit replaced the pop charts. Many thought the secular spotlight had lost him for good. But legends don't disappear. They transform. When he returned to mainstream music, the voice carried more weight. Not just desire, but reflection. Age softened the edges, but the emotion remained piercing. His catalog became more than hits. It became scripture for soul music itself. Seeing Al Green today feels reverent. The movement slower, the energy calmer. But when he sings, that whisper still wraps around you like memory. The Gasp isn't about physical change. It's about how timeless he feels. Because Al Green didn't just define an era, he defined a feeling. And decades later, that feeling still lingers, gentle, aching, eternal. Smokey Robinson, the poet who never stopped believing in love. Before R&B had flash, before it had edge, it had poetry. And Smokey Robinson was its quiet architect. In the 1960s, as Motown began shaping the sound of a generation, Smokey stood at the center, not with brute force, but with finesse. With the miracles, he delivered songs like "You've Really Got Hold on Me" and "Oh, Baby, Baby," each lyric wrapped in longing, each note dipped in velvet falsetto. He didn't just sing about love. He studied it, dissected it, romanticized it. Behind the scenes, he was just as powerful, writing, producing, helping to find the Motown sound that would dominate radio wave for years. His pen carried elegance. His phrasing felt deliberate, almost literary. Where others belted, Smokey caressed the melody. As the decades turned, he stepped further into his solo career. Cruising, Being With You, songs that felt like late-night drives with the windows down. The world reduced to two people in a heartbeat. Time, however, has a way of reshaping every icon. Seeing Smokey Robinson today can feel almost surreal. The youthful glow of the 60s replaced by the unmistakable imprint of years lived. The face changed, the voice softened, yet the falsetto still there like a thread connecting past the present. The Gasp isn't about aging, it's about endurance. Because Smokey didn't chase reinvention. He stayed faithful to romance, to melody, to sincerity. In a genre that evolved into grit and swagger, he remained a gentleman. And maybe that's his greatest legacy. While trends shifted and eras collided, Smokey Robinson never stopped believing in love. And somehow, after all these years, we still believe it when he sings. And now that you've seen them, the real question is, which transformation shocked you the most? Was it the glow-up, the comeback, or the legend who never faded at all? These artists didn't just change. They evolved, survived, and redefined what longevity in music really looks like. And whether you gasped, smiled, or felt a wave of nostalgia, one thing is clear. R&B royalty never truly disappears. If this video took you back, hit that like button. If you grew up on these voices, subscribe right now and drop a comment telling us which star made you look twice. Because trust me, this is only the beginning. See you in the next one.